like to talk a bit about the time I spent in Turkmenistan, which is a very small country in the Middle East. And as we had been discussing eyeballs, it just came to mind my time spent there. They make rat tail soup there, which I'll go into the details of how that soup is made. And they have a number of very tasty soups they make there, but their rat tail soup was extremely tasty, as I recall. And the distinguishing feature of that was the goat's eyes, which had been deep fried and put in the soup. And you would eat, drink the soup and eat the goat's eyes. And the thing about a deep fried goat's eye is that when you bite into it, it's kind of like juicy inside, like an eyeball is, and it is an eyeball, and so it's really one of the best eyeballs. If you've ever eaten eyeballs before, the goat's eyeball is really one of the best. And I'll tell you something about this, how the soup is made. Well, there's rats all over the place in Turkmenistan. Oh, there are rats everywhere. Rats. And so there was, naturally, among these indigenous people, there was a need to find a way to eat the rats and use all parts of the rat. And so naturally, the tails, being very difficult to eat otherwise, were boiled in a soup. And it was 100 tails in a soup. It would actually be more accurately called 100 rat tail soup, but shortened to rat tail soup. And there's always in the rat tail soup, there's always an albino rat's tail, which an albino rat is an all-white rat. And that is a very rare thing. The 100th tail would then be an albino rat's tail, and if you get that in your soup, oh, that's quite an honor. Oh, yes, quite an honor. Yes, they would ladle that out with a big ladle, and if you were to get the albino rat's tail soup, that means an extra portion for you. Thank you very much. Yes, very lucky for you if you'd get that. I was not fortunate. I didn't get the extra rat portion. It was unlucky. In any event, as to the use of rats and eyeballs, the rat is used, the whole rat is used, the tails are used for soup, and when you get the goat's eyeball, you need fat to deep fry that in. So every rat has about half an ounce of fat in it. So if you say you get 100 rats, that's 50 ounces of fat, I believe. I didn't do my math correctly. About 50 ounces of fat, which is certainly enough to deep fry a number of goat's eyes in. And sometimes if you're kind of squeamish about eating an eyeball, I can tell you that one of the best things you can do is eat one of the Turkmenistan goat's eyeballs, which is breaded first. They bread it first before they deep fry, which kind of makes it so you can't really see, the pupil and the whole features of the eyeball, the veins, the whole thing. So if it's breaded first, I just wanted to mention that. And the bread there is very good, although I must tell you, the indigenous bread is being eaten considerably less than it used to, and that's a shame because it was quite nourishing and tasty. It's been pushed out by the use of that people are now eating Western breads, in particular Wonder Bread. Wonder Bread is the only Western good that is brought into Turkmenistan, and they send large convoys across the mountains to get, every month they get Wonder Bread. It's the only product that's brought in that they use, and it's not as nutritious, I don't think, as the local bread. And let me say that the reason I ended up being in Turkmenistan is I had met one of these convoys, and I hitched a ride on one of these convoys of camels and horses, and enormous loads of Wonder Bread being brought in. And I hitched a ride, was curious where all this Wonder Bread was going, and ended up in a small village, I guess, in the middle of Turkmenistan. Well, let me talk more about the indigenous bread, made in a traditional way, but it's difficult to get yeast there. They don't really have yeast. You need yeast in bread to make it rise. So what is commonly done is the headman's grandfather is enlisted, and what he does is he puts on his yak boots, boots made of yak skin, and he leaves them on his feet for 2 months. He never takes the yak boots off. He does all kinds of exercises so his feet get really sweaty. He never takes his yak boots off, except for 2 months later when his feet have ripened into a wonderful odoriferous mass. He takes his boots off and he kneads the bread with his feet. He kneads the bread, and the yeast, which is built up inside his yak boots, goes right into the bread, giving it a wonderful flavor, very ripening. The bread rises. It's a beautiful, fluffy, wonderful bread with a bit of a cheesy taste to it. There's a kind of a cheesy taste to this bread. It's a great cheese bread, wonderful, and I recommend it. Much better than the imported Wonder Bread, absolutely. I can talk about the rats. Rats are a very big part of Turkmenistan. Rats are really the beginning and the end of life there. You will be in contact with thousands of rats while you're there. So, let me just say there are a few distinguishing features of the people of Turkmenistan, and some of them not good, I must tell you, certainly unhealthy. But seen as, rats crawl all over you while you're sleeping. They crawl all over your face. They crawl under your blankets. There's no escaping the rats in Turkmenistan. And one of the distinguishing features of older people, they're very old, is the absence of noses. Their noses have been gnawed off by the rats. Rats eat their noses while they sleep. And the reason is you can cover every part of your body and protect it, except your nose. You have to breathe naturally when you sleep. And so the nose is the only part that's exposed in these people, and the rats need meat to eat, to survive. And so they've eaten their noses down on all of the older people, and some of the younger ones as well. And so they have no noses. Nothing basically is there except two holes in their face that suck, kind of like you hear a sucking sound. It's kind of like and when they laugh, it's kind of a snorting, sucking sound, because for want of a better word, boogers are always dripping in and out of their nose and vibrating, and they're visible. These very large white and yellow boogers are always just throbbing right above their mouth and dripping. They drip into their mouth as well while they speak, and they, of course, eat that. And there's no calories are left wasted in Turkmenistan. And I had met a particularly old person an older man, and he had, I thought they were boogers in his nose, but I was quite mistaken. He had, they were not boogers. There were boogers there, certainly, large yellow and white pustule boogers, but there was all these other white, elongated, wiggling things in his nose. And I was curious about that. And I said, "What is that?" He said, I said, "Das würden Abendchen gewürden," which, if I translate that, it sounds Nordic, but it's not really Nordic. That means those are the white worms which grow in my nose. And this is something that, as there are no antibiotics, the large masses of worms are often infesting the nasal cavities of the older people there, and occasionally one will drop out, be consumed naturally. And they provide a source of nourishment. And when an older person dies, these worms, naturally no longer have a host, and so they'll crawl out of every orifice in his body, his nose, his mouth, his ears, and they are collected after death and made into a paste, which is then spread on the toasted Wonder Bread. And that is considered quite a delicacy, eaten with much religious fervor and with much religious significance by the relatives of the dead person afterwards. And I had been offered this wonderful dish which I accepted. I really don't have any more to say about Turkmenistan. There are other things that they do there. Oh, I had in fact had my own nose bitten when I was there. I was sleeping. Oh yes, here's a tidbit that might be of interest to. I had been sleeping there, and I was covered up in a blanket made of probably 500 rat skins, and I was sleeping, and I woke up in the middle of the night with a feeling of pressure upon my chest, and I woke, and a kind of a pinching feeling on my nose, and I woke up, and there was a very, very large white rat sitting upon my chest and biting my nose. Imagine that! Oh, my nose was bleeding, and as I looked up, he looked me directly in the eye with his red, beady eyes and his bloody mouth, and he goes, ee, 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 ee. That was the sound he made. I immediately reached up, grabbed him, wrung his neck, broke his neck, and threw him across the room. Well, this was absolutely the wrong thing to do. I can tell you. I did not know the customs there. The custom, very wrong thing. This was an albino rat, considered quite rare and had a precious religious significance. And you just simply could not kill a white rat without repenting in some way. And so naturally, they went easy on me as I was a foreigner and did not know their ways. Otherwise, I would have been killed. But they went easy on me. And the only requirement for this was that I, of course, had to sleep with my head on the rat's body, using the rat's body as a pillow for the next week. And it was, I found it rather unpleasant, but actually, you get used to it. Some things, you just get used to it. Kind of nice and furry. Of course, near the end of the week, it stinks horribly, and ants generally come in and eat the eyes and face of the rat, and you'll wake up with a trail of ants across your neck or something, and it's somewhat unpleasant, but I eventually got used to it, and was able to adapt, and later on, the rotting flesh was used in a soup, naturally. Nothing goes to waste in Turkmenistan. I enjoyed the soup very much. Gained quite a taste for it, as a matter of fact. It had kind of ripened. Yeah. And, well, anyway, as we were discussing eyeballs, I thought I would digress a bit. Have a good day.